right, welcome back. This is Newslink Russia on ENCA. So South Africa's railway sector is currently in a state of decay and has had quite a devastating impact on the country's ailing economy. Switching the transportation of goods from rail to road has also created another problem, with a long line of trucks now wreaking havoc on our road network. The cost to Transnet and the South African GDP runs in the billions of rand. So this week we're shining the spotlight on the country's struggling rail sector. And Economist Professor Bonke Dumisa joins us now from Durban to give us his perspective on what should be done to turn things around. He joins me now for this conversation. And Prof, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your time and a very warm good morning. I think perhaps give us a history lesson, if you may, just comparing the South African rail and harbours by the then apartheid government. We know that since democracy, April 14th, 1994, that was obviously debunked by the ANC-led government. And now we have Transnet. How would you compare the two, or perhaps even share with us how exactly the SA rail and harbours worked in comparison to Transnet?
Well, what I can say, those who really know me, they know my political CV. I'm not going to get into it. So some of them want to be stereotyped will find it very uncomfortable when I say the South African railways and harbours was very efficient given the circumstances then, and far more efficient compared to Transnet now. The problem with the South African railways and harbours is that it was anchored around apartheid, so they were only caring about 13 to 20% of the population. So all the other things that they did not look at the big picture. And that's why then when the new government came in, it just wanted to change that. And in the process of doing that, they did what we call throwing the baby. In fact, in this case, I say babies with the bath water, which is what people must avoid. Let's just take you back to South African railways and harbours. They had their own police system, and those police were really monitoring everything that happened on the railway lines and at the railway stations. As soon as the new government came in and they took over that portfolio, they got rid of the South African railway police, who were doing a very good job, I must state, even though they sometimes went overboard. If ever someone was caught dead having committed a crime on the railway system, they would make that person be buried, still handcuffed. I mean, that was going to the extremes, but that's just how serious it is. For those of us who grew up in the townships using the township trains, if Usha is staff that is jumping into the train or out of the train whilst it is in motion, when those police caught you, they gave you a good clap. You'll never ever think of doing that again. So those were some of the things then that prevented lawlessness during that time. And then when we moved over after 1994, we find then that people are just doing as they please. And that's why we always see people who are cutting railway cables, etc., and they sell them and they go to scrap yards. Police don't do anything about that thing. And that's why that is one of the things which is affecting Transnet.
Right.
But I want you want solutions, and I want to move to the solutions.
Yes, please, Prof. Yes.
If ever we can address the issue of lawlessness, then that may be the start of addressing the issue of the railways, because you find then that people just invade railway lines and with impunity, and once they've invaded them, the trains cannot move there. And those were the tracks where some of these trains which were moving goods were moving through. And politicians are involved in that one. I mean, I come from Umlazi. In Umlazi, the trains were not getting in and out for a long time because people had invaded the railway lines between Soweto Station and Reunion Station, and that has happened throughout the country. Those are the things which must be attended to. So deal with the law, both on the railway lines and at the railway stations. But with Transnet itself, the choice of leadership, they must choose people who really understand the big picture of Transnet. And those people will understand then that whilst they may not get back the passenger rail, or in certain parts, I mean, for example, moving from Durban to Gauteng, very few people will still use that thing because it used to take a very long time.
Right.
But they must make sure then that they use market segmentation then to emphasize and make sure that they increase the efficiency where they operate effectively. I mean, move the trains between Umlazi and Durban and Wamashu, the trains between Soweto, Park Station and other places are operating at less than efficient levels. They can be improved. And they must make sure they have, okay, they cannot bring back the South African railway police, but there must be police there who will really monitor everything. Their bus system used to be very efficient. It used to be called a Pullman.
Right.
I do not know what happened to that thing. They must really look at this thing. And then political interference must also be limited. So if you address all of those things, things can get better, because as it is now, some people are saying that the running of Transnet is costing this economy over 3.1 billion rands.
And that was going to be my next question, Prof. Perhaps if you may allow me just to jump in there, because there seems to be, a whole lot of big industries and sectors affected. If we're talking about the cost of the economy being at approximately 3 billion rand, mining is one of them, right? The automotive industry is also one of them. You highlighted this, that the moving and transportation of, newly assembled cars, or just cars in general, has also equally been affected.
That is it. In fact, when I said 3.1 billion, I meant 3.1 trillion rands, because Transnet alone costs us over 336 billion rands a year. What has happened in the past, all the cars which were newly assembled used to be transported to different parts of the country through the trains, and they were quite good at that. But because of the inefficiencies with Transnet, many of those car manufacturers, you can count Toyota, Ford, VW, etc., move the moving of their new cars through the road. And many of you have driven behind those very long car carriers. You get scared firstly, and some of them, the manner in which they are driven is very scary. And those are the cars and all these other trucks who are on the road now because Transnet cannot do its work. Those are the trucks who are causing all these potholes we're always complaining about. So that adds to the cost of not having Transnet being taken care of and being made efficient. So let us make something to make sure then that the transportation of cars, the coal, when you're driving from Richards Bay to the other parts of the province, you really struggle because you've got about 15 kilometers just trucks waiting to offload at Richards Bay Port. And that used not to happen when Transnet, South African Railway Harbours, was still efficient. So let us deal with those things. Let us remove all this political bias and sort the place out. By the way, just removing top management without fixing the issues at Transnet is not going to fix anything.
Well, we wish we had more time to delve more on that, but thank you so much for joining us, Professor Bonke Dumisa, joining me on the state of decay for our railway networks, particularly Transnet, saying that the South African railways and harbours was a lot more efficient. They seem to have more systems in place than what we are seeing with the now Transnet.